A doctor's secret. She woke from a coma to find a stranger with her baby. Subscribe now. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of our gripping stories. And if this tale of two broken hearts finding a second chance resonates with you, give it a thumbs up. Your support means the world. A woman wakes from a coma to find a stranger, a doctor, holding her baby. She never imagined what he would reveal. Can love heal such deep wounds? Or does the past still have a score to settle? Watch until the end. This story will move you. And tell me, do you believe two broken hearts can heal together? The unthinkable choice on a cold winter's morning when St. Michael's Hospital in London was at its quietest, Dr. Arthur Matthews was finishing the last of his daily reports. The soft lights and the echo of distant footsteps created a familiar atmosphere of calm in his routine, until the urgent sound of an emergency bell shattered the tranquility. He looked up to see a nurse with a pale, tense face, announcing that a patient in critical condition had just arrived. It's a young woman. She seems to be alone and needs immediate intervention. She's in labor, but there are complications, doctor, the nurse explained quickly. Arthur felt a weight in his chest. He was an experienced obstetrician, accustomed to managing complicated births, but there was something about this news, the loneliness of this unknown, vulnerable woman, that moved him immediately. When he arrived at the operating room, his eyes fell on the figure of Eleanor, who lay unconscious on the gurney, her features reflecting exhaustion and pain. With no one by her side to accompany her, her fragility was almost palpable, a shadow that drew him in, with a compassion that arose from the depths of his being. With expert hands and a serenity that concealed the growing concern in his chest, Arthur began the procedure, focused on saving both lives. The air in the room was thick with tension. Every second counted. Eleanor's breathing became weak, irregular, and the baby's heart rate fluctuated in a disturbing rhythm. Arthur took a deep breath, concentrating with every fiber of his being on bringing this baby into the world. The room filled with the anxious murmurs of the assistants and the rhythmic sound of the machines monitoring every detail. Finally, after a prolonged effort, and with the precision of a Swiss watch, Arthur managed to hold the tiny child in his hands. "It's a boy," he announced. He lifted him, and the baby let out his first cry, strong and full of life, as Arthur looked at him with indescribable relief and a strange sense of tenderness that immediately overwhelmed him. However, the peace of the moment was shattered when he looked at Eleanor, expecting to see a maternal awakening in her eyes, but instead, her vital signs were dropping rapidly. "Eleanor," he whispered softly, not even knowing if that was her real name. The young woman lay in a coma, absent from the miracle that had just happened beside her. The nurses and assistants in the room began to take measures to stabilize her, but Arthur, still holding the small boy, felt a knot in his chest. She had arrived alone, with no family, no friends, no one to claim the child. The baby was also alone, and, in some way, Arthur felt responsible. There was no logical reason, but the connection he had felt the instant he first held him was inexplicable. When the procedure was over and he left the room, the echo of his footsteps mixed with the distant cry of the baby that still resonated in his memory. Throughout that night, Arthur couldn't stop thinking about the baby, who was now in the neonatal ward, surrounded by machines and staff who cared for him, but without a mother to hold him. The idea that this fragile child, who had just opened his eyes to the world, was alone, deeply unsettled him. He felt there was something in him, a need to protect him, to give him the security and warmth he deserved, at least until Eleanor woke up. Without thinking too much, Arthur made a life-changing decision. The next morning, he spoke with the hospital administration and asked to take the baby home. He explained that he would care for him temporarily until the mother's situation was resolved. No one at the hospital understood his decision. Not even he could rationalize it. But he felt in the deepest part of his being that it was the right thing to do. Upon arriving home, he watched the little one sleeping in his makeshift crib, and an indescribable calm filled the room. Arthur, a man accustomed to logic and science, was surprised at how quickly that child had filled a space in his life. As he watched him sleep, he spoke to him in a low voice, almost a whisper. "Your mom is going to wake up, Leo, and I'll take care of you until then." Each day, Arthur went to visit her at the hospital, took her hand, and in a low voice, talked to her about Leo, about how the little one was starting to recognize his voice, about the small smiles he gave while sleeping, about how he filled his house with joy with his mere presence. There was something inexplicably comforting about that routine. Even though Eleanor remained unconscious, Arthur felt that she was listening, that in some corner of her being, the words he dedicated to her reached her heart. A shared emptiness. The first rays of dawn streamed through the window of Arthur's house, casting a soft glow on the room where Leo slept. The doctor had gotten used to waking up early, with the baby's first stirrings, and the little one, upon opening his eyes, would always greet him with a smile that disarmed any resistance in his heart. With care and tenderness, Arthur would lift him from his makeshift crib, feed him, and sit with him in the living room armchair, watching as the baby explored the world with his curious little eyes. Every day, the bond between them grew stronger. Without realizing it, Arthur began to think of Leo as more than a temporary responsibility. Every laugh, every small babble brought him closer, and, in the deepest part of his heart, he began to feel that caring for him was not just a duty, but a desire that filled him with a joy he had never known. However, Arthur knew that at the hospital, a woman remained asleep, unaware that her son was growing, day by day, without her. The image of Eleanor in that bed, alone and vulnerable, deeply disturbed him. So, after his mornings with Leo, he would head to the hospital, where he would spend the afternoons by Eleanor's side, waiting, almost desperately, for some sign of improvement. Upon entering the room, Arthur would take her hand, hold it gently, and begin to talk, as if she could hear him. "Today, Leo smiled at you," he would say in a whisper full of emotion. "He's a strong boy, just like you. He has your nose, and those little eyes full of curiosity. Sometimes he cries at night, but I think it's because he misses you, because he knows that somewhere in the world you're there, waiting for him." As the days passed, Arthur began to share every small detail of Leo's life with Eleanor, describing the baby's growth, his first smiles, and the nights he would rock him to sleep. And though Eleanor remained motionless, Arthur felt, in the deepest part of his being, that she could hear him. There was an inexplicable connection between them, a silent bond that strengthened every time he spoke. With the passage of time, Arthur's routine became indispensable. Every morning he longed for Leo's first smile, and every afternoon he yearned for the moment he could sit beside Eleanor, holding her hand and talking about a son he already felt was his. However, he also began to recognize another feeling that disconcerted him, a growing affection for this unknown woman who, despite her silence, seemed to understand every word, as if her soul responded to the call of his voice. One afternoon, after excitedly describing how Leo had started making noises to get his attention, Arthur fell silent, observing Eleanor's serene face. "You know," he murmured, his voice trembling, "it's strange. I don't know how to explain it, but I feel like you are part of something I don't know how to name. From the first moment I saw Leo, I felt I had to take care of him. And now, I can't imagine my life without him, or without you." The silence filled the room, but Arthur didn't feel awkward. It was as if, in some way, his confession had been heard. As the faint afternoon light reflected on Eleanor's face, Arthur closed his eyes, allowing himself a few seconds of rest beside her, his hand still intertwined in hers, feeling that, in that contact, they were both connected in a way that went beyond words. The awakening that morning began like any other. For Arthur, after feeding Leo and rocking him in his arms until his breathing became soft and quiet, he headed to the hospital, as he had every day since Eleanor had fallen into a coma. But upon arriving, the twinkle in the eyes of the nurse in charge and the way she looked at him were the first sign that something unexpected had happened. "Dr. Matthews, Eleanor woke up," the nurse said with a warm smile, as if sharing news that illuminated someone else's day. For an instant, Arthur felt as if the world had stopped. His heart pounded, and his mind debated between excitement and an uncontrollable fear. What would she say? How would she react to discovering that he had been caring for her son, that little one who had become the light of his days? Taking a deep breath, Arthur walked towards the room. As he opened the door, the world seemed to fade around him. There, in that bed, where he had sat so many times talking to her, was Eleanor, her eyes open, looking at him with a mix of surprise and confusion. Her face, though pale, had a serene beauty, and her dark eyes seemed to shine with a mixture of vulnerability and strength that he had not seen in anyone else. "Eleanor," Arthur said, his voice trembling, and a knot in his throat he hadn't expected to feel. She observed him, trying to process the presence of this unknown man, whose name she didn't even remember. Umori murmured, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm Arthur, the doctor who was in charge of your delivery," he explained, approaching slowly, trying not to overwhelm her. His gaze softened, and with infinite tenderness he added, "Your son, Leo, he's fine. I've been taking care of him all this time." The mention of her son seemed to ignite something inside Eleanor. Her eyes, which until that moment had only reflected confusion, filled with tears upon hearing Leo's name. It was as if, despite having been in a deep state of unconsciousness, her heart had never stopped feeling the bond with her baby. "Leo," she whispered, testing the name on her lips as if it were a newly discovered treasure. The emotion on her face made Arthur feel a warmth in his chest, a sense of relief, and at the same time, a fear of breaking this delicate connection that had just formed between them. With a soft and warm tone, Arthur sat by her side, reaching for her hands and taking one of them in his. "Eleanor, there's so much I want to tell you," he said. "Your son has been a blessing. From the very first moment, he has filled my days with joy. But I know he has been waiting for his mother, and you have fought so hard. Now that you have awakened, I would like you to meet him. But I need you to recover a little more before I can take you home." Eleanor looked at him, still somewhat fragile, but in her eyes shone a determination that made Arthur feel a mixture of admiration and a silent affection that was growing in his chest. "I don't know how to thank you. I don't even understand everything that has happened. But if you have been taking care of my son, I can't ask for anything more," she said, and her words were full of gratitude, though exhaustion still weighed in each one. Arthur, with a warm smile, nodded. "You don't have to thank me for anything. Caring for Leo has been, well, I don't know how to explain it, but it has given me a peace and a happiness I didn't know I needed." He interrupted himself for a moment, realizing he had spoken from a vulnerability he rarely showed. "I just want both of you to be together now." During the days that followed, Arthur went to visit her every day, sharing anecdotes of Leo. Small, everyday moments that painted a picture of what the baby's life had been like in her absence. Each smile from Eleanor, each silent tear upon hearing about her son, deepened that invisible connection between them. Finally, after several weeks of recovery, the time came when Arthur extended an invitation that had far more meaning than his words suggested. "Eleanor, if you want, you can come to my house. That way, you can meet Leo and be close to him while you continue to recover." Eleanor looked at him, surprised and emotional. She couldn't imagine what that experience would be like, but the idea of being with her son and receiving support from someone who had shown so much generosity and affection was something that filled her soul. Without hesitation, she accepted, and in that instant, they both understood, in a silence full of meaning, that their lives were about to intertwine in a way they never would have foreseen. The first steps of a family. The first day at Arthur's house was, for Eleanor, a mixture of intense emotions that left her breathless. When she crossed the threshold of that house, she felt she was entering an unknown place, but at the same time, it was warm and safe, as if every corner held silent memories of the days when Leo and Arthur had shared a special bond. The atmosphere was cozy, the furniture simple but elegant, and there was a sense of peace that seemed to wrap her in an invisible hug. As Arthur guided her to the small room where Leo was sleeping, Eleanor felt her heart beat faster. Emotion and nervousness intertwined in her chest. Finally, after so many weeks of uncertainty, of pain and absence, she was going to hold her son in her arms. When Arthur opened the door to the room, time seemed to stand still. There was Leo, resting peacefully in a small wooden crib. His soft skin, his rhythmic breathing, and that unique fragrance of a baby filled Eleanor's heart with a love so deep it took her breath away. She advanced slowly, without taking her eyes off him, and as she bent down to pick him up in her arms, tears flowed uncontrollably. "Leo, my baby," she murmured between sobs, cradling him with infinite tenderness. Her fingers trembled as she stroked the baby's soft hair, and her lips formed a smile broken by emotion. In that moment, she realized how much she had longed for that contact, how much she had feared losing it forever. Eleanor looked at Arthur, who was watching her from the doorway with an expression that mixed satisfaction and deep empathy, and she gave him a grateful look that said more than 1,000 words. "Thank you, Arthur. I don't know how I can ever thank you for everything you've done," Eleanor whispered, feeling that words were not enough to express the immense gratitude she carried in her heart. Arthur smiled, approaching them slowly. "You don't have to thank me for anything, Eleanor. Leo, he became an important part of my life, and I simply did what I felt I had to do." In saying this, he looked at the baby with an affection that went far beyond that of a simple caregiver. Eleanor, as she cradled Leo, began to notice the special bond that Arthur and the baby shared. Every time Arthur approached, Leo would stretch his little arms out to him. His eyes would light up, and a tender smile would appear on his small face. That natural, almost instinctive connection between the two of them moved her deeply. She could see in Arthur's eyes the genuine love that had grown in him for Leo, and that filled every corner of her being with warmth. The days passed, and little by little, the three of them began to form a routine. Arthur prepared the bottles, Eleanor took care of dressing Leo, and together they shared the nights, caring for the baby when he woke up. Every small gesture, every shared smile, strengthened a bond that felt more and more like a family. Eleanor's life, which until recently had been marked by loneliness and uncertainty, now felt full, filled with moments of love and a peace she had never experienced. On one of those nights, while Leo slept in his crib and the house was filled with a peaceful silence, Arthur and Eleanor found themselves in the kitchen, sharing a cup of hot tea. Arthur's gaze, warm and protective, sought Eleanor's, and she felt a wave of emotions overwhelm her. "Are you okay, Eleanor?" he asked, with a soft tone that overflowed with affection. She nodded, letting a shy smile cross her face. "I'm better than I've been in a long time. I can't explain what I feel, but this peace, this tranquility, is something I never thought possible. It's as if I've finally found a home." Eleanor's words filled Arthur with an emotion that overwhelmed him. It was as if those weeks of struggle and care for Leo had been a prelude to something much bigger, a deep bond that had formed between them and that now united them in an indescribable way. He took Eleanor's hand, feeling the warmth of her fingers intertwine with his. "You and Leo have brought something into my life that I didn't even know I needed. Caring for him, sharing these moments with you, has made me discover something I thought I wasn't destined for." Eleanor looked at him, moved. Their eyes met, and in that moment, words were not necessary. Both understood that what they shared was more than a simple responsibility for the baby. It was something deeper, a feeling that had grown between them, silent but unstoppable, and that now enveloped them in a warmth that filled every corner of their souls. The unspoken promise. The weeks passed with a serenity that felt foreign to them both, as if this moment of peace and joy was an unexpected gift in lives marked by hardship. Eleanor, still in the process of regaining her strength, began to open up to Arthur, sharing the secrets and wounds of a past that, until then, she had kept hidden. One night, while Leo slept soundly in his crib, Eleanor and Arthur sat on the living room sofa, a comfortable silence hanging between them. Eleanor took a deep breath, her gaze fixed on her clasped hands, and began to speak, without looking up. Her voice, though low, was heavy with contained emotions. "My life was never easy," she began. "Since I was little, I learned to depend on myself. I grew up in an environment full of hardships, and when I thought I finally had someone by my side, that person abandoned me without a word, without an explanation. And when I found out I was expecting Leo, I felt I finally had a reason to go on. But I was alone. He left me too." Arthur listened in silence, feeling every word sink deep into him. It wasn't just a sad story, but one of constant struggle, of a strength he admired more and more. With each detail Eleanor revealed, Arthur felt his need to protect her grow more intense, as if in that moment he had made a silent promise never to leave her alone again. "When I was in the hospital, I had no one to turn to. I felt lost, shattered, and then I woke up and you were there. I don't understand why you did everything you did, but I can never thank you enough," Eleanor continued, her voice breaking slightly. Arthur gently took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers in a gesture of silent support. "You don't have to thank me for anything," he responded in a whisper full of warmth. "From the first moment I saw Leo, I knew I had to take care of him. And then, in getting to know you, I discovered that caring for both of you had become necessary for me." Eleanor's gaze met Arthur's, and in that instant, without the need for words, they both felt that something deeper had been born between them. The connection they had built day by day, caring for Leo, sharing laughs and simple moments, had blossomed into a feeling that went beyond friendship or gratitude. The night wore on, and between conversations and confidences, Arthur began to reveal aspects of his own life that few people knew. He spoke of his dedication to medicine, of the years in which his work had been his only purpose, and of how, since Eleanor and Leo had come into his life, everything had changed. I never thought I would have a family," he confessed to her, with a smile that reflected a mix of nostalgia and joy. "But now, with you both here, I feel I finally have something to fight for outside of the hospital. Leo and you have filled a space in my life that I didn't even know was empty." Eleanor listened to him, taking in every word as if they were promises made in silence. The barriers she had built around herself, constructed to protect her from disappointment and pain, crumbled little by little, and in their place, she felt something new, something beautiful, growing between them. Amidst shared laughter and moments of tenderness with Leo, that feeling they had both tried to deny or not name began to flourish without reservation. The warmth Arthur offered her, his constant support, and the sincere love he radiated towards Leo were the kind of love and protection Eleanor had always longed for, but never believed possible. One afternoon, while they both watched Leo play on his small blanket, Eleanor turned to Arthur, her eyes reflecting a mix of gratitude and something more, something he could barely define. "Arthur, you have given me so much. I don't know how to explain what I feel, but since I met you, I feel that I finally have a home. And it's not just because of Leo, it's because of you, because of everything you have done." Arthur looked at her in silence, his eyes full of a deep tenderness. No more words were needed. They both knew that this moment marked the beginning of something that, without having planned it, had grown in their hearts. The night had fallen over the house, and a comforting silence enveloped every corner. Leo slept soundly in his crib, his soft breathing barely audible, while Eleanor and Arthur were in the living room, sitting across from each other, sharing a last cup of tea before going to rest. The dim light of the lamp illuminated their faces, revealing a mixture of nervousness and something more that neither of them could completely hide. Arthur had spent several days gathering the courage to tell Eleanor how he felt, but he always held back, afraid of ruining the harmony they had built together. However, tonight he felt he couldn't keep quiet any longer. Eleanor looked at him with a calm expression, although in her eyes shone a curiosity that seemed to perceive Arthur's internal struggle. Finally, he took a deep breath, lowered his gaze to the cup in his hands, and then set it aside, looking up to meet Eleanor's eyes. "Eleanor, there's something I've been wanting to tell you for a while," he began, his voice barely a whisper, but charged with sincerity. "From the first day I saw you in that hospital, and then holding Leo in my arms, something changed inside me. I can't fully explain it, but I felt a connection, something I had never felt before." Eleanor watched him, listening to every word with a mix of surprise and emotion. Her hands rested on her lap, and without realizing it, her fingers began to tremble slightly. Arthur continued, his gaze fixed on her, his expression showing a vulnerability he rarely let show. "Caring for Leo, spending these days with you, has been something wonderful, something that has made me feel complete for the first time in a long time. And I know this might sound rushed, but Eleanor, I have fallen in love with you." The last words came out in a whisper, and Arthur felt his heart pound, waiting for a response, afraid she might reject him or not feel the same. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears upon hearing that confession, and a soft smile formed on her face. "Arthur, I've also felt something very special since I woke up and saw you there, by my side. I never thought I would find someone who could care for me and Leo in this way, who could give me a home and a sense of belonging." She leaned towards him, taking his hand in hers, feeling the warmth and firmness of his fingers intertwine. "You have also become a fundamental part of my life, not just as the man who saved my son, but as someone with whom I truly feel whole. Arthur, I love you too." They both remained in silence, letting their words resonate in the air, feeling how their confessions filled the space between them with an indescribable warmth. Arthur, without taking his eyes off Eleanor, lifted his hand and brought it gently to her face, caressing her cheek with tenderness. "This means that you want us to form a family together," he asked, his voice trembling with a mix of hope and happiness. Eleanor, with tears sliding down her cheeks, nodded slowly, without letting go of Arthur's hand. Yes, Arthur, nothing would make me happier than to build a life with you and with Leo, to be a true family. Without another word, Arthur leaned towards her, approaching slowly until their lips met in a soft kiss, full of promises. It was a kiss that sealed all the words, all the longings, and all the dreams they had held in their hearts. A kiss that marked the beginning of something new, something they knew would be the pillar of their lives from now on. They separated just a few inches, looking into each other's eyes, and in that instant, they both understood that they were not alone, that they had found each other at the exact right time, and that their lives, once separated and full of hardships, were now united in a bond that nothing could break. In the stillness of the night, they hugged, letting their hearts beat in unison, feeling the certainty that, at last, they had found the love and family they had both yearned for. A new beginning. The morning of the wedding dawned with a clear sky and a gentle breeze that filled the air with the scent of fresh flowers. It was the kind of perfect day that seemed to be made to celebrate the union of two souls who had overcome so much. In the small garden where they had decided to get married, Arthur and Eleanor exchanged glances as the few guests settled into chairs adorned with white ribbons and delicate arrangements of wildflowers. Eleanor was radiant, dressed in a simple white gown that enhanced her natural beauty and serenity. Her smile, shy and full of emotion, reflected the happiness she felt in the deepest part of her being. Arthur, his heart pounding in a way he had never experienced, could not take his eyes off her. He felt incredibly lucky, and at the same time, somewhat in disbelief, to think about how life had led him to this moment. Leo, in his grandmother's arms, wore a small shirt and trousers that made him look as special as the day deserved. He observed his surroundings, not fully understanding what was happening, but the warm atmosphere and the smiles of the people seemed to infect him with an innocent happiness. Eleanor caressed his cheek from time to time, looking at him with a mixture of tenderness and gratitude, as if every day with him and with Arthur was an immense gift. The officiant began the ceremony, and everyone fell silent, creating an intimate and cozy atmosphere. Arthur took Eleanor's hand, intertwining his fingers with hers, and as he looked into her eyes, the world around them seemed to vanish. There were only the three of them, united by a deep love that had been born in the most unexpected way. "Eleanor," Arthur began, his voice somewhat trembling but full of sincerity, "I cannot express in words how grateful I am to have found you. That destiny placed me in the right place at the right time. Caring for you and Leo taught me what it means to love unconditionally, and today, in front of everyone, I want to promise that I will love and protect you and our son every day of my life." Eleanor took a deep breath, holding back the tears that welled in her eyes. "Arthur, you are my miracle. You appeared when I needed it most, and you filled my life and Leo's with a love I never imagined possible. I promise to walk by your side, build a life together, and never forget the value of every day we share. I love you with all my heart." With those words, the silence was filled with a palpable emotion, and their gazes held in a profound communion. The officiant declared them united, and Arthur, without waiting a second longer, took her in his arms and kissed her with the same tenderness and passion he had felt since the first time he saw her awaken in the hospital. The small group of friends and family erupted in applause and smiles, while Eleanor held Leo, and they both wrapped their arms around her in a family hug. That moment seemed frozen in time, filled with happiness and gratitude, a moment that reflected everything they had been through to get there. After the ceremony, everyone gathered around a table, decorated with flowers and warm lights that created a homey and cozy atmosphere. Eleanor's laughter resonated as she shared anecdotes with close friends, and Arthur, always by her side, watched her with a deep love that was reflected in his eyes. Leo, in the arms of one of the family members, went from person to person, receiving hugs and smiles from everyone, as if he were the small symbol of all the good that had happened to them. As evening fell, when the sun began to hide on the horizon, and the sky filled with golden and pink tones, Arthur and Eleanor walked away from the group, seeking a moment of tranquility for themselves. They sat on a wooden bench, observing the landscape, and remained in silence, enjoying the peace they shared. Arthur hugged her and rested his head on her shoulder, sighing with satisfaction. "I can't imagine my life without you, without Leo, without this family we've formed. Sometimes I wonder how it's possible that life has given us something so beautiful." Eleanor smiled, caressing his hand. "Sometimes love comes when we least expect it, Arthur. Maybe we met in the most unconventional way, but I think destiny had something special reserved for us. Today, here, I know that everything we went through was worth it." Both looked at each other, and in that instant, under the colorful sky, they felt complete, as if all the pieces of their lives had finally fit together. With Leo in their lives, and a love that sustained them, they knew that any future challenge would only be one more opportunity to strengthen the bond that united them. Dear viewer, if this story moved you, we invite you to leave a comment and give it a like. It fills us with joy to read your thoughts, and every message from you inspires us to continue sharing stories of love, hope, and overcoming. Thank you for joining us and being a part of this moment. See you next time.